the first one in, I usually get the calls for the new jobs, and I work for a big company. We have 10,000 employees, and I'm the farthest thing from an entrepreneur that you could ever imagine. I've worked for one company for 49 years, no joke, and so I was really fortunate. With the help of Bob, we did a job in the 80s in Charlotte. We built the Charlotte Coliseum, and I was in a position to become, within the company, the person that knew the most about sports facilities. And so when we needed to go after a job or something, they would call me, and they would put my resume in. And that just increased exponentially as more and more sports projects come on. We're currently doing the NFL stadium for the Rams and the Chargers out in Los Angeles. It's a $3.6 billion project, and it'll be like nothing you've ever seen. It's going to open in this season, and hopefully with the virus that's going on now, we're not going to have any hiccups on that. We just finished the DC United project here, and we have 2 new soccer stadiums being built in Ohio. We have an arena in Alabama. We're going after work in Washington State, Baylor University, Clemson. So we're in a lot of different levels: college, professional, civic, in sports, and also we do convention centers, because it's a similar type of project in that it's a lot of people coming together in one spot. So there's a lot of similarities between the two. But let me give you a little statistic here. Small businesses approximately get 25% of their customers from networking. So this is the lifeblood of the business. This is what brings in the work. Larger companies, it's as high as 80% through networking. And we do a lot of this here. And what I'd like to do today is tell you about some of my experiences and some of the things that have worked for us in getting the benefits of all the networking that we do. So it's connecting with people for the exchange of information. And the key word here is exchange. It's not a one-way thing. You're not always asking stuff for something. You're going to build relationships with people. They're going to need something from you, and you're going to need something from them. And they're going to call each other. You're going to see people. You're going to meet with people. So there's an exchange of information that's out there. And some of the benefits that come from a large network that can be established. You get information, you get facts, you get leads, you get personal advice. Sometimes, what are you guys doing with how you feel about the virus that's going around? And you can talk to people and get their ideas. Employment. People get jobs all the time through networking. Somebody knows somebody, gives you a recommendation, there's an opportunity for there. Sales, primarily what I do. I get the first call in a lot of cases for projects that are coming up. Broaden your exposure to the business community. You get known more, the more events you're going to, you can get out and get them done. Your talents get known, and ultimately you can establish friendships from this. And this has happened to me over and over again, where I have some very good friends through the business connections and the networking that I've done. So I'd like to talk about 3 things. First thing I want to talk about networking organizations, places that you would consider to go to expand your networks, record keeping, how to keep track of all this stuff, and then finally some techniques and tips that I've found that work for me over the years. A lot of different places to go. Probably the best one is in-house, right where you are right now. There's a lot of people with information that you may benefit from, and they may benefit from knowing you and what you know about what's going on. People who are no longer in-house. We have a thing we call Turner alumni, people who have worked for us and have left and helped us get work and done joint ventures in the future. I worked for a fellow here who ran our sports division for 15 years, and he left and went to another company that was giving out work, and we got the first 5 out of 8 jobs that they got, we got. So this was another opportunity here to get work from someone that had worked with us. Neighbors. I got a great story here. I was at, we were living in DC, this is in the early 90s, and I was over at my neighbor's house and we're having a beer, and he says, hey, I know somebody who does kind of what you do. I said, well, what is that? And he says, well, he's a real estate developer. And I said, well, that's a good thing. We work with developers. And at this time, and Bob remembers this well, is that when we came down from New York, we were the out-of-towners, and we weren't in any of the internal groups. I mean, everybody, you see all these Clark Signs and all these guys who are they all went to high school together, and they had their own networks from childhood. So we were breaking into this, and so we couldn't get any work with developers. So I go to meet the guy, and I say, well, what do you like to do? And he says, well, why don't we just go out for dinner? So I went out for dinner with him. This is in the early 90s. That led to us getting the DC Convention Center with his group, 7-year contract, the big DC contract. There we were the program managers. That led us to the Nationals Park. That led us to work with the DC government, and now we're doing school work over 27 years later. We're still, from that one contact, that one guy, we got into that group, and here we are now still doing work based on that one. Organizations out there, I was involved with Leadership Greater Washington in 1994, and I'm still friends with a lot of the people in that network. We keep in touch. There's professional organizations. If you do belong to an organization, my advice would be to get on a committee, to get involved, because that's where you really meet. I mean, if you go to the big meetings and that, there's some benefit to that. But if you can get on a committee and really know people personally, church. I got another story for you. In 1987, we were looking to adopt a baby, and we're at church at Blessed Sacrament on the Circle in DC, and there's an Italian priest comes in from the embassy, Giovanni Tonucci. And so, guy's great, so being Italian, I said, after Mass, I said, well, why don't you come over to my house, I'll cook you pasta. He said, oh, bella pizza, beautiful. So anyway, he comes over and we got to know him really well. And we told him that we were trying to adopt, and it was very, very difficult. The waiting lists were years and years and years and years. So 5 months later, he is in Erie, Pennsylvania with someone that he knew from, who was canonized together in Italy, his buddy, and who was the Archbishop of the Erie Diocese. And he said to the Archbishop, he says, I have this family in DC that are looking to adopt. Is there anything? And sure enough, that connection, through that network, we got a baby, and 2 months later, healthy guy who's now 31 and doing well. So it's just amazing how you can start with something so simple and it can cascade into getting what you really want. There's classes out there, and right, there are classes in photography or groups or clubs, right? All that stuff. That's expanded your sales of your pictures and everything. Mm-hmm. So we even know someone who started groups, networking groups. We know a young woman who has a women's night for poker. She does sales, and it's called Chips and Giggles, which I thought was pretty clever. And she also does a dance night called Dance Dance Party Party, where real estate women get together, just the women, and they have networking. And she's told us that there's a lot of information that she would not get in some more structured situation, but in those social deals, it's all the information flows. There's volunteer groups, and the last one I had here is called Crazy Places. 2 stories. It's 1996, and again, we're trying to look for work outside of the DC neighborhood, and we go down to North Carolina, and we go to Fayetteville, right next to, was it Fort Bragg, right? It's Fayetteville? Yeah. And they're building a new arena there, and so we don't know what the politics are. So we're talking to people. We went to the the city government and all this stuff. And so they said something about the influence of the Lumbee Indians, which are in Lumberton, and how they dominate the drywall industry and also have influence in selection of what's going on in politics. So we found this out at a barber shop. So we we're at the barber shop, and sure enough, the chief of police comes in, and he tells us all of the stuff we needed to know. Got the job, built the arena, and I doubt that if we didn't have that insight, I don't know how our sensitivities wouldn't have been correct to get the job. It's 1989, and we're just finding out that the Carolina Panthers are going to build a new stadium in Charlotte, and the owner is going to be Jerry Richardson, who just recently retired. And he lived in Spartanburg, South Carolina, and the stadium was going to be in Charlotte. And we had a joint venture partner, and Bob, you remember Bill Caldwell well, right? So so our joint venture partner would show up at the barber shop every third Thursday when Jerry Richardson would come up in his Bentley and get his hair cut. Oh, Mr. Richardson, how are you? How's everything? So he did that for about a year. And so when it came time to go after the job, and so he was known, and they would chat a little bit. Oh, what do you do? He said, well, and our joint venture partner would say, well, I'm a general contractor, and I'm tied with these guys out of Washington, and they do sports work, and and he'd make a joke about, what are you talking about? To build your stadium, you just call. Sure enough, that was the first big stadium we got, actually 4 years later. So that was a long gestation period, but it started with that connection. Record keeping, very important. Bob used to send me out and say, go to that meeting and find out there's going to do a new development on Mass Ave, and I want you to know all about it. So I go out there and I would drink ginger ale, honest Bob, at these cocktail parties.
I was drinking wine and whiskey.
Yes, you were.
And I couldn't, and I had a hard time remembering. I'd meet 10 people, and they'd say, oh, well, yeah, this is going to happen, and they would give me too much information, and I would have to write stuff down. I figured out that I should be writing it down. And so I'd come in the next day, and Bob would say, well, what you learn? I said, forgot, Bob. I what? So anyway, a little tip, if you're going to get a lot of information, don't be afraid to write it down. There are databases out there, CRMs. So so if you're interested in one of these, I guess you don't have one, right? You use them?
Yeah, there are free software products online for starting businesses, and their hope is that you will grow to be big enough to pay for the bigger version of it. And one of them, an example of it is Zoho's CRM, and I think there's a group of them, I'm not sure how many, out there, so you can Google free CRM for small business. Anyway, and pick the one you like that's easy enough to use, or use your cell phone or an Excel model or a notepad or a book, but create your own list of all of the prospects and keep track of them.
Right. What I do is the cell phone, and one of the things I found very effective is if you put in keywords for instance, if this guy sells scoreboards, I put scoreboard in the contact so that if what's that guy's name, I can always go and just search scoreboard. I worked with a guy who in his phone kept spouses' names, kids' names, and birthdays. And one of the things about networking is that if you're only going to people when you want something from them, it doesn't work as well as though you just kind of stay in touch. A simple birthday, or when you call them, how's Joe? How's your husband? That kind of thing. It goes a long way. Initially, don't rule out anybody. Don't rule out anybody. So Amanda's got a great story about an assistant who got promoted and then eventually became very senior in the company.
Director of purchasing. So
Yeah. Not a bad person to know in any company. There's an architecture firm in Kansas City, and I got to know the receptionist very well. So every time I would call, I'd chat her up and this. And if I needed any information now, I've known her 15 years. Hey Tina, there's a new job coming up. I need some information on it, and she will go and connect me with the right person.